Okay, humans, this one is going to be a little bit longer than usual. There is a Ming Dynasty doctor in the 1500s named Wāng Jī, and in one of his books, he wrote a discussion of emotions, and then he had a bunch of cases, I think 7 cases afterwards. So first we have the discussion, then we have the cases. And this is, this whole section of a book that's called, here it is, Shíshān Yī'àn. That kind of rhymes. Anyway, his, Chinese men often had multiple names. These are pictures of him, by the way. On the previous slide, it's a picture from, I think, the 2nd edition of his book. And on this slide, it's a picture from the 1st edition, and note he's wearing glasses. Did you know that they had eyeglasses in the Ming Dynasty? I think the idea came from the West, but yeah, that must have been something, because you get to be 40 years old and you have a hard time reading the characters because your vision is declining, and a scholar, that must be horrific to lose vision. Anyway, also in this picture, note that, ancient times they didn't have punctuation. And so often people would punctuate the text later so to make it easier to read. It's really hard to read without punctuation. Anyway, so Chinese men had multiple names. They took on other names at different times in their life. And so he took on the name Shíshān, which is Stone Mountain. He must have lived someplace called Stone Mountain or something like that. And then he sometimes was called the retired scholar of Stone Mountain. But in any case, the book this comes from is called Stone Mountain Medical Cases. So these are mostly his medical cases. There's some discussion of things, like we'll see some discussion here. And there are also some cases that come from other times and places, especially in this section, but also in other parts of it. Anyway, this book was published in 1531, and the section is called the Wāng Jī, the 5 minds. And at least that's how Nigel Weissman translates it. This really refers to the 5 emotions associated with the 5 elements, but this word is not literally emotion. So anyway, let's do it. So here's the part that's a theoretical discussion. And of course, my translation is far from perfect, but I think I got the idea for everything, even if you could quibble with some of the spelling or grammar, not spelling, the grammar or something. Anyway, so he says, various books say disease develops from overdoing the 5 minds. In other words, from being overly emotional. Herbs can't treat this. You have to use emotions to overcome other emotions. Many ancient and modern formula books omit this. They don't even discuss it. There are no examples in the old books, so that when you come across this kind of disease, you can't really tell, how did ancient people treat it? There are no examples. So because of this, I searched for treatment examples from earlier worthies. In other words, well, earlier doctors, but also from history books and other things. And I wrote them out below to instruct the people who come after me, even including 500 years later, you and I. So that's his little introduction to this section. And then he goes on this thing that's a little bit boring. We don't have to do all of it. Once you see the first sentence, then all the other sentences are alike, just using a different emotion, a different element. So he says, for example, anger damages the liver. We know that, I think, from Suen chapter 5. At least excessive anger damages the liver. Emotions, when they're appropriate and short-lived, then they don't cause damage. But, this is excessive anger damages the liver. The liver, of course, is wood. when angry, then qi attaches to the liver. And I think it means anger qi, that excess qi that's generated by anger attaches to the liver. So spleen earth is going to receive the harm, is going to receive the evils. Well, I'm sure you know in 5-element theory that wood controls earth. So liver can control the spleen, and it often over controls it. So, it's saying, yeah, if you're angry, then the spleen will receive some harm. But also, when wood is excessive, the liver can also self-sicken. The liver can also make itself sick. So, in other words, anger is going to cause disharmony in 2 organs, the liver and the spleen. And then it does the same with all 5 elements, joy, heart, heart is metal, so that extra fire will hurt. Heart is fire, so the extra fire will melt metal. And then also the extra fire will make the heart, excessive as well. So sorrow, do you need me to read this to you? I don't think you do. Like, you can pause the slide, the video if you want to read it, but all of these are exactly the same, just following the 5-element emotions. And, it's nothing more than 5-element theory, okay? And then he includes a few other things. And in some ways, it's like, wait, why is he including cold and heat? But in Suen 39, which is one of the chapters of Neijing that really talks a lot about emotions, it actually, in this section of emotions, it also talks about cold and heat. So I guess he's trying to include everything that's in Suen 39, even though this is supposed to be about emotions. Cold damages the physical body. The physical body is yin. So when cold overcomes blood, there should be a comma there. Yang receives the evils. When cold is excessive, yin also becomes sick. So cold can damage yang, but cold can also make yin problems with yin, because now yin is excessive. Same thing. Heat damages qi. Qi belongs to yang. When heat damages cold, then yin is going to have problems. And when heat is excessive, then yang will also be excessive and make itself sick. Furthermore, these several emotions can be used to treat each other. So sorrow can treat anger, that's metal controlling wood. Metal chops wood. So speak of disappointment and suffering to move the patient. So now, the patient's angry, and then if you can make them feel sorrowful, the anger will dissipate because the metal controls wood. It's this kind of theory, okay? Joy can treat sorrow. So tell jokes and speak informally to entertain the patient, try and make them laugh. Fear can treat joy. So all of these are, this is water puts out fire. Fear is water, is kidneys. Joy is fire, is heart. Water puts out fire. So if somebody's got excessive joy, speak of dread and death to frighten the patient. Anger can treat thought. So that's wood controls earth. So speak with insults and deceit to stir up the patient. I think that patient will come back. Yeah, but this is what it says. And thought can treat fear. So, get them to ponder this, to forget about that, in order to convince the patient not to be afraid. So that's just 5-element theory again. And that also comes from Neijing 74, I think. He's not using the words of Neijing 74, but Suen 74. I think that's the chapter. Anyway, it goes on. We're getting to the cases. It goes on. Overall, you must use cunning and deceit for these 5 emotions, these 5 minds. There's nothing it cannot reach. If you can arouse the patient's ears and eyes to change what they see and hear, then you've cured the case. If the person, though, lacks mental ability, you can't use this method. In other words, if they can't understand what you're saying, if they, are dull-witted, maybe this won't work for them. He goes on, heat can treat cold. Cold can treat heat. That's pretty obvious. Leisure can treat taxation, like resting can treat somebody who's like worked so hard that they've run themselves down. Becoming accustomed to something can treat fright. Yeah, things are scary when you don't know what they are or what they're all about. So it goes on to talk more about fright. The classic says, which means Neijing says, for fright, become familiar with it. That's Suen chapter 74. This word ping can have other meanings, level it and so forth. But here, based on commentary from other doctors, my understanding of it, in this case, it can mean to become familiar with something, which is one of its meanings in the dictionary. Okay, so for fright, become familiar with the object that scares you. Fright means suddenly encountering something. When you become familiar with this thing through sight and sound, through looking at it and hearing it, it's frightening anymore. Only when text qi is consumed, which again comes from Suen 39, or when fearful qi is taken by force, which is not a direct quote. Maybe he substituted a character here, maybe it's a typo, but anyway, when fearful qi descends is what Suen 39 says. These are difficult to treat. He's saying fear is difficult to treat, taxation is difficult to treat using this method. Okay. And then he says joy causes fewer diseases because when you're joyful, all your channels and vessels relax and become harmonious. Yeah, I mean, that's something we intuitively know. The first question I get when I talk about emotions in my basic theories class is like, how can joy cause any problems? Well, of course it can if it's extreme, but generally it's the most pleasant of these. Okay. So let's go on to the cases now. Some of these cases are historical or from earlier medical books. And some of these cases, it's hard to find the source of them. So actually, some of these cases might be things that Wāng Jī heard that aren't written in a book, or maybe even his own cases. But anyway, so if I've been able to figure out where the case came from, I tell you. And if I can't, well, we just know that Wāng Jī talked about it. Anyway, so he says a person became ill due to excessive amounts of joy. So a doctor named Zhuang felt his pulse and then cried out in surprise, "Oh!" and then gave an excuse saying, "Oh, I need to go fetch your herbs," and ran off quickly, kind of like he was startled or something. And so Dr. Zhuang didn't come back for several days, and then the patient thought this meant he was going to die, because in ancient times, if they read your pulse and it was a death pulse, they usually declined to treat. And so he thought this guy ran off and was like too cowardly to tell him he was going to die. And so he's having all this worry and anxiety and so forth. The patient wept sorrowfully because he didn't want to die. And so he took leave of his family to go see the doctor and say, "Hey, what's up?" So when he left his family, he said, "I'm going to be around for long." Zhuang actually knew the patient was about to recover when he showed up and comforted him. The patient said, "Why did you do that to me?" And the doctor cited Su Wen, which says, "Fear overcomes joy," which is Su Wen chapter 67. Okay, I thought it was 74, it is 67, whatever. And, this may be called obtaining the mysterious gate. That's like a fancy phrase, but it means like getting the key to the problem that was hard to find. So the doctor made him afraid, although it says sorrowful up there, made him afraid that he was going to die, and water puts out fire. Okay, that's that story. Kind of cruel though. And there's another case where the chief complaint, it seems to be a protruding tongue. So after giving birth, a woman's tongue protruded and she couldn't retract it. Uncomfortable, right? So I want to say Leo Locke helped me translating some of this one. Okay, the rest I did all on my own. I made a mess all on my own. This one, Leo Locke helped me. Thank you, Leo. So a doctor applied Jusha to her tongue, and then he further ordered her to get back in the position of giving birth, making two women support her. They squatted and held onto a rope, often is the way, but they'd still have people, on both sides supporting her. So he had, even though she's already given birth, he's had her get back in the birthing position. And then he hid pots and pans and bowls and all kinds of stuff on the outside of the house on a wall in a precarious place. And so, they fell down and all clattered and made a sudden noise. And she heard this sound, and I guess it startled her, and her tongue finally retracted. So then Wāng Jī is trying to explain the theory of this. The tongue is the sprout of the heart. The heart opens in the tongue. This must have been, due to it protruding. The condition must have been due to fright during difficult childbirth. Like maybe she was afraid she was going to die, or afraid the baby was not going to be okay, or maybe, childbirth is scary. So heart fire was not peaceful. So the tongue protruded due to her physical effort during labor. As she's pushing, that also maybe pushed her tongue out. So he used Jusha to settle heart fire, cinnabar. He also made her suddenly hear strange sounds to make fear descend. The classic says fear descends Qi, which is Su Wen 39. So he used fear to overcome it. It sounds more like he used fright, but this is just the case. Okay? Okay. Case 3, worry. I think there are 2 worry cases. In former times, a high government official was ill. No rain, it came from the heavens. There was a drought. In addition, he had seen more than 10 doctors, and none of them had been able to help his illness. We don't really know what his illness is, but anyway, nobody had been able to help him. So the last doctor finally arrived. He took the pulse, and then he counted the date on his fingers. There's a lot of use of the fingers to do calculations in Chinese culture. You might see it in a martial arts movie, but for feng shui and astrology and even calendar stuff, they had like ways of counting on the fingers that are quite complicated, not just simply 1 through 10. So he figured out the date on his fingers, and he said, "Oh, it's going to rain on such and such an evening." Then, as he was about to leave, the high official, still asked him, "Are you sure? What's going on here? Are you implying my illness cannot be cured? Why do you just talk about rain and you don't give me any medicine?" So again, as I told you with the other case, if they read the pulse and thought it was a death pulse or whatever, they saw something ominous in the patient, that often refused to treat. So he's worried that the doctor is refusing to treat him. But Later on, it rained on the exact evening that was predicted. What I want to know is, how did this guy know it was going to rain on such and such a day? I don't know that. Anyway, so the rain fell and the high official became happy. It's had a drought and now it's finally rained. He got up and walked in the courtyard, and by dawn, the disease was totally gone from his body, as if like it was clothing and he just took it off and shed his clothing. The next day, this doctor who told him it was going to rain came to pay a visit. And the high official happily asked him, "Doctor, you said it would rain yesterday. How did rain make me recover?" And the doctor said, "Sir, your disease was due to worry. I personally gauged your devotion to the people." He's a high government official, so he wants to, he's like a good one. And he wants the people in his his prefect or wherever, he was a prime minister. Anyway, he wants the people to be healthy and happy. And so, the doctor realized that he was devoted and benevolent to the people. "You were worried about the people. I took the drought as the reason for your worry. So, I knew you would recover when it rained." This is the principle. Why would you need medicine to recover? What you needed was rain. So, for whatever reason, Wang Jī takes out some of the names of, like who was the doctor, who was the patient. I don't know why he did that, but this is apparently a story about Prime Minister Han, which was a northern Song dynasty prime minister, and a doctor named Zhuo. Yeah, because this story is retold in other medical texts. I've translated this before, and so I know other texts say. By the way, yeah, some of these you've heard before if you've been following my videos, but let's just see what Wang Jī has to say. Okay. This one I've never translated before. A county level policeman captured a criminal. He used iron chains around the criminal's neck to bring the criminal back to his county, because he's a county policeman. When they were halfway back, the criminal threw himself into a river and died. He'd rather die that way than whatever punishment he was likely to get for his crimes. When the policeman went to tell the criminal's family, they intimidated him and threatened to kill him. Although the policeman was exonerated and it was said it wasn't his fault, it still cost him money, maybe to placate the family, maybe just for the court case, something like that. Worry and anger made him sick, and he even seemed to be drunk or dull-witted, and he was talking nonsense and raving and, ranting, and, he really became crazy. And he did not recover his normal awareness. I diagnosed him, and we don't know who the I is. At least I don't know if this is Wang Ji's story or if this is from some earlier source, but it does say, "I diagnosed him. This is due to worry over the loss of money. He must be, or you must be happy for the disease to recover. How could herbs treat this?" So he had somebody melt tin to make it look like a bunch of silver ingots. In ancient China, they molded metal into a particular shape, gold ingots and silver ingots. And, that was one way to store your wealth. Or if you had to buy something expensive, more than just what coins would pay for, you'd use these ingots. So he made fake silver ingots out of tin, which is much cheaper. And they placed them next to the patient, and the patient saw them and became happy. He held them and stared at them. He was so happy to see that he had money again, because he, was worried about his loss of money. And so the disease then recovered. This is called using joy to overcome worry. So, Yeah, but like if he really recovered and then figured out it was tin and not silver, is he gonna get sick again? I don't know. I guess there's only worry one. Maybe there are a couple of thought ones. A girl and her mother loved each other. This is a famous story. I might have translated this for you before, I might not have. I don't know. Anyway, the girl and the mother loved each other. And then after she got married, the mother died, and the girl was just so mournful. So she couldn't get over her sorrow. She became ill from longing for her mother. So I have to talk about that. This word we usually translate as thought when we talk about the five emotions or the seven emotions. But one of the meanings of this word is longing or pining or yearning for something. That is also this word. And in a lot of the cases, when they talk about thought, it's not like intellectual thought, but it's actually longing. And this girl was just longing for her mother. Her Jing and Shen became depleted. Actually, the term Jing Shen just kind of means overall physical and emotional, mental health. So, we could take this literally as Jing and Shen were depleted, or just like her physical and emotional health went downhill. She was listless and weary and only wanted to sleep. She had vexation and oppression of the chest and diaphragm. She was weak and weary every day, and she didn't respond to herbal treatment. So, yeah, this is a case from a Dr. Han. Okay. So Dr. Han, I observed her and said, this disease is due to longing, due to thought by five element name. So herbs cannot cure it. This patient had a female shaman that she really liked to consult. Okay. And she had complete faith in the shaman. The shaman channeled spirits who descended into her and spoke of misfortune or fortune. So, you could go to the shaman and find out if things are going to go well for you or not. And so she was called an oracle child. I don't know if that's a special term. I think I Googled it and didn't come up with something, but anyway, she's a woman, but she's called an oracle child. Maybe she had been doing it since the time she was a kid. Anyway, so that Dr. Han, made the husband bribe the shaman and coach her. So she was to channel the mother, who she probably already knew because she had done stuff for the family before. She was to channel the mother, and this is what she was supposed to say. In a previous existence, my daughter and I were enemies. You and I were enemies. She's supposed to say this to the daughter. You entrusted your life to me by being born to me so that you could harm me. You came as like my baby so you could get back at me. Because of this, your life overcame your mother's life. I died because of you. Now, in the netherworld, in the underworld, after death, I want to return my revenge on you. The illness that is now drowning you is really my doing. When I was alive, we were mother and child, but now that I'm dead, I am your enemy. So this is really quite cruel, but the shaman is supposed to, make up this story of how the mother is now the daughter's enemy. The husband returned from talking to the shaman. This hasn't happened yet, but he told the shaman, that's what you're supposed to say. And then he teased his wife, saying, hey, your disease is like this. I need to go out. Why not invite, now they're calling her the child granny, to divine about it? The wife replied, okay. And so she invited the diviner, the shaman, who did just what the husband said. The girl heard it and became enraged. She said, I became sick because of my own mother. My mother has harmed me. Why should I keep longing for her? Why should I keep thinking of her, if you want to use the five element term? And so she then stopped longing for her mother. And as a result, the disease recovered. This is using anger to overcome thought. Of course, anger is wood, and thought or longing is earth. Wood controls earth. Okay, we're getting through. There's still a couple more. There's 7, so we're almost there. This is one I have translated before, so you may have heard it, but I love this story. A government official usually spoke cautiously. One day he assembled a banquet. A large radish was there. Wobo, the daikon kind of radish. A guest admired it, and the host said, "Oh, I even have some the size of a human, the size of a person." The guests all laughed, thinking there was no such thing. The host, this government official, was deeply embarrassed and he blamed himself, saying, "Oh, these people have never seen one so big. But I spoke of it. It's right that they thought my words were absurd and just laughed because they've never seen such a thing." But because he was so embarrassed and he was generally a cautious guy, he consequently became ill and herbs didn't help. His son, though, was well read and understood human nature. So he understood his father did not usually speak lightly of things and had become ill due to embarrassment. So he believed his father. And so he took his father, he thought his father's statement had to be vindicated for the condition to resolve. So, a government official will be posted in different places, but they'll probably have a family home. They own land somewhere, and their wife or wives and children are still growing up there while he's posted in some other, city. So travel took more than 10 days from the official's office back to the home. So the son sent somebody, to the family property to fetch, the largest daikon, the largest radish they can find as big as a person, and bring it to the official's office. You know, these radishes can be stored for a long time. They don't go bad like a tomato would. Not that they had tomatoes, because this is before there was contact with, the Americas. Anyway, so once he had the lobo, once he had the radish, he gathered his father's previous guests, and then he pushed his father to accompany him. And his father saying, "Oh, I'm sick. I don't want to go. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to go." But he kind of forced his father to come. And so he got, another banquet. Everyone's drinking a lot. Everyone's half drunk. And then the son carted out the daikon and placed it in front of his father's seat. And it actually does say on a cart, at least if I remember correctly. Yeah, something like that. Carted it out. Um, so it's so big it had to be in a cart. And all the guests were amazed at the size of this thing. And his father was very happy. And as a result, he quickly recovered. So I don't know, is this a 5 element thing? Uh, Thought binds chi. And so maybe this is under thought, and but thought is earth, and joy is fire. So that doesn't follow the 5 element thing, but still, he made the father happy again, and the father was no longer ashamed or embarrassed because what he said had been true. Okay, our last case. This is bound up chi, which thought binds chi, according to Suen chapter 39. And this is another one that I've translated before, so you may have heard it. After marriage, a woman's husband went off on a business trip for 2 years and didn't return. And because of this, she didn't eat. She laid sleepily around like she was mentally dull. She had no purpose in life if her husband wasn't there. She had no other disease. She often sat facing the inside of the bed. They had these beds that were like a whole room, with doors and everything. Anyway, so this is when thoughtful chi binds. So Suen chapter 39 says, thought binds chi. But of course it's overly thoughtful. And maybe she's longing for her husband, maybe she loves him and she misses him, whatever. Okay. It was hard to treat just by using herbs. Because emotions don't really get treated by herbs when you're in a situation. So obtaining joy could resolve it, because they're saying that she's thinking too much. And again, we're using joy, fire to feed earth. But what you have to know is that this phrase, obtaining joy, also means getting pregnant. And of course, if her husband's away for 2 years, how is she going to get pregnant? And, women were trained that like bearing a son was their purpose in life. And so she can't fulfill her purpose until he comes back. So, maybe she misses him. Maybe she just misses having a role in the family. Maybe she wants to get on with getting pregnant. So if you can't, if she can't get pregnant, or she can't become happy to get out of her depression, then make her angry, because anger controls, wood controls earth, so anger controls thought. So here we have domestic abuse as therapy. They mocked her and slapped her face and criticized her show of emotion. And as expected, she got very angry. And then she cried loudly for about 3 hours. And this may actually be 6 hours, because they had 2-hour periods where we have 1 hour periods. So, her getting angry and crying made it resolve. And then they gave her just one package of herbs, and she asked for food, because before she hadn't been eating. So and this is a case from Judanshi, I said, even though the disease is recovered, it will only stop when she obtains joy. And again, that's likely to mean when she gets pregnant. And so they sent for her husband to return, and as expected, the disease no longer occurred. So that's it. Those are Wāng Jī's cases, emotional cases. As you may have seen, I also have cases about emotions from Zhang Zihe, and I'll make another one from Yang Jizhou, the author of Zhenzhou Dacheng. So yeah, there's lots of stuff about treating emotions this way. Okay.